We're going to resume where we left off in our previous video, and that is working on the ear of this model. I've gone ahead and merged the ear object along with the main body layer by simply going to the layer, hovering over in the Vox Tree layer panel, and then right clicking and choosing merge. Then you have the option to merge it to whichever layer you want to apply it to. And if you see seams or gaps, you can always use either smoothing or use the fill tool, or sometimes even the grow brush is pretty good for that particular purpose. So I went ahead and switched to surface mode here, and I'm now working with some of the brushes specific to surface mode only. The build-up brush is very similar to the build brush in voxel mode. I'm switching now to a preset which is based on a standard 3D coat brush, but you can adjust the parameters in the toolbar. You can choose a specific brush draw mode in the E panel, maybe a different brush alpha. You can also use the brush options panel to make some adjustments, and once you've customized it the way you want, then you can save it as a preset and even rename it however you like. You'll find a pretty nice default list already available to you, and many of these mimic the same type of brushes you might already be accustomed to if you're coming from another popular sculpting application. I've been using the Pt.2 brush, which is relatively nice whenever you're trying to build up the major contours of your model. But in this case, I switched to the draw brush, which it's probably the tool you want to use if you're making fine lines or very sharp defined strokes rather than broad blocky ones like the Pt.2 brush. And you might also want to utilize one of the brush draw modes that allows the tapering of the brush radius as you press down with your stylus. So I'm using the pinch brush here to kind of clean this up a bit, and I probably should have used the steady stroke option in the toolbar to make that a much cleaner line from the outset. And I want to try and sharpen or create an edge on the front and the back side of that bony appendage just off the chin there. I'll switch to the build-up brush and do a little bit more work here in the shoulder area. I'll hit the S key to bring up the symmetry panel and then hide the symmetry plane. It's still active, I just made it non-visible in the viewport. Work on the tail a little bit more here. Oops, let me undo. I'm going to hold the shift key and smooth a little bit. And switch to a sharper brush alpha, so it acts more as a polishing tool, I find. And also when using the build-up brush, it allows me to make a sharper edge here on the tail. Switch to the pinch brush. Let's now switch to the move tool. Do a little bit of tweaking and nudging here. And hold the shift key and smooth on the fly. And so yeah, again, that sharp brush alpha in conjunction with the lower smoothing intensity, you're going to get a much more subtle smoothing effect, and that acts as a polishing tool all on its own. So you definitely want to experiment with that a little bit. Going back to doing a little bit of tweaking with the move tool. Maybe this time I'll try a live clay brush, such as the inflate clay brush. And these by default will add extra tessellation wherever you're brushing. So you could have a medium to low polygon model here in the viewport, and it's going to subdivide it only where you're brushing. So I'll switch to build clay. It's very similar to the build up brush among 3D Coat's standard surface mode brushes, but again, it offers dynamic tessellation as you're brushing. At the early stages of a sculpt, it might seem counterproductive to even try to utilize live clay brushes and dynamic tessellation. However, if there's a brush that you like to use or it works very well for what you're doing, there's no reason why you should feel apprehensive about using live clay tools this early, because you can always switch back and forth between voxels very interchangeably. But what I would suggest is once you're in the high detail stage or the latter stages of your sculpt, then it would be prudent to stay in surface mode. The reason being is that you've already used live clay or perhaps the subdivide tool to create these localized zones of higher resolution so that you have the extra polygons only where you need them. Now, if you switch to voxel mode at that stage, what's going to happen is 3D Coat is going to fill that mesh with voxels, and it's going to apply an adaptive outer mesh to it. That outer mesh always has an even distribution of polygons. So when you come back to surface mode, all that localized subdivision is gone. So make sure to keep that in mind. I'm going to start working on the inner part of the mouth here, holding down the control key. Now the shift key to smooth a bit. Now try to build up these gills, if you will. I try to inflate them a little bit. I'm going to select, let's try the Pt.2 preset. It may seem a bit redundant to have a default brush located in your presets, but typically what you'll do is if you decide to keep the name the same as the default, then perhaps you might just make some slight modifications that you want to be the actual default behavior every time you use this brush. So the naming is just a matter of user preference and nothing more. Just wanted to mention that in case someone thought, hey, why do you have redundant tools? Because really that's what your presets are. They're just a copy of a default brush. And you can see that reflected in the thumbnails of your presets because they show or indicate what brush or tool it's derived from. And then you can see the different draw mode icons as well as brush alphas and then your naming. And if you want, you can go to the upper right hand corner of the panel to the little drop list toggle and choose to have text only if that's what you prefer. I'm still using that same Pt.2 brush at this point, but I'm holding down the control key to try and create kind of a pocket in between the nostrils and the eye socket. Just holding down the shift key to smooth on the fly here and there. Alright, so I think we're just about done with this part of the creature, trying to rough out some of the general shapes, and we'll continue to detail it later on, but for now we're going to pick up in the next video where we're going to work on the antenna that extends from just behind the ear. So stay tuned, we'll see you then.